street was alive with noise. Cars honking, motorbikes rumbling past, vendors shouting, and the chatter of people going about their evening. It was one of those nights where everything felt ordinary. Ordinary for everyone, except for the moment about to unfold. A man in uniform, a cop, strutted down the sidewalk, chest puffed out, thinking he had authority over everyone around him. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on a figure walking calmly, hands relaxed by his side, a faint smile on his face. That man was Manny Pacquiao, boxing legend, world champion, a man who had faced some of the toughest opponents on the planet. But to the cop, he looked like just another person on the street. Someone to intimidate, someone to assert dominance over. Without warning, the cop stepped closer, his voice rising, carrying threats and insults meant to provoke. Worse, some of his words were tinged with racism, meant to belittle, to humiliate, to make the crowd laugh at someone else's expense. At first, the people passing by barely noticed. A few glanced over, uneasy, unsure what to do. The vendors paused mid-sale, sensing tension, but still unsure. Manny didn't flinch. He didn't shout back. He didn't even raise his voice. His calmness was unsettling, like a quiet storm waiting to break. The contrast was immediate, one man filled with arrogance and anger, the other radiating complete control. The crowd began to notice. Conversations died, mid-sentence. Phones were drawn instinctively. People stepped back, creating a small circle around the confrontation. There was an unspoken question in everyone's eyes: who will break first? The cop, thinking his threats were working, leaned in, his smirk growing, mistaking silence for fear. He had no idea who he was dealing with. To him, this was just a show of power. To everyone else, it was about to become a lesson in something far more dangerous than fists: discipline, focus, and authority. Manny's eyes met his. Not with anger, not with judgment, just calm, steady, and unshakable. The kind of calm that made even the boldest people reconsider their next move. In that instant, the air changed. What had seemed like an ordinary night on a busy street was now the stage for a moment people would never forget. Because sometimes, the most dangerous people aren't loud. Sometimes, the most powerful people don't even raise their voice. And tonight, that lesson was about to be learned. Have you ever seen someone completely underestimate another and immediately regret it? The street seemed alive yet peaceful in a strange balance, a rhythm that only a busy neighborhood could create. Vendors called out the last deals of the day, their voices mingling with the faint buzz of traffic. The smell of street food, grilled meat, fried rice, sweet pastries, filled the air, making people slow their pace to decide what to grab. Children ran past on scooters, their laughter echoing between buildings. Motorbikes zoomed by, weaving between cars, while taxis honked as impatient drivers nudged forward. Amid all this everyday chaos, Manny Pacquiao walked calmly, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know him. He was dressed casually, a simple t-shirt, loose jeans, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. No entourage, no security that stood out like a fortress. Just Manny, blending into the world around him to anyone passing by. He looked like an ordinary man enjoying an ordinary evening stroll. He was with a few close friends, men he trusted for years. They laughed quietly, sharing small jokes, relaxed in the comfort of familiarity. Manny's body language exuded confidence without arrogance. His eyes scanned the surroundings, noting the movements of people, the traffic, and even subtle details, like a vendor shifting a basket or a dog wandering near a parked car. Every step, every glance was deliberate, unhurried. There was no rush, no sign that danger, or a life-changing moment, was approaching. The cop, on the other hand, was already watching from a distance, an aura of misplaced authority trailing him, uniform crisp, boots clicking against the pavement, chest out. He walked like he owned, not just the street, but everyone on it. To him, the world was divided into two categories: those who obeyed and those who dared to defy. He had already decided which category Manny belonged to, even without knowing who he was. Arrogance can blind people in ways logic never can. At first, the cop did what most people in positions of authority do when faced with someone calm. He misjudged the silence. He assumed hesitation was fear. He assumed control over a uniformed badge could overpower anyone, and he began to step closer, his eyes narrowing, scanning Manny's small group of friends, calculating the advantage he believed he had. Meanwhile, the crowd around them remained unaware of the storm about to break. A mother pushed a stroller past the scene, children tugging at her sleeves, pointing at colorful signs on the storefronts. A man stepped out of a small convenience store, bags in hand, humming a tune. To them, this was just another evening, another block in their daily life. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing seemed dangerous. And that was the problem. Moments like these are dangerous because the world feels safe, predictable, and ordinary. That's when mistakes happen. That's when people with power make decisions without thinking of consequences. Most confrontations don't begin with chaos. They begin with comfort, routine, and underestimation. Manny, however, was anything but ordinary. Though calm, there was a quiet energy radiating from him, the kind of energy only someone who has faced the most extreme challenges can carry. His presence alone commanded respect, not through threats, not through intimidation, but through discipline, awareness, and focus. He didn't need to raise a voice. He didn't need to make a scene. The subtle tension in his posture, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the calm measurement of his steps. It was all enough to unsettle those who could read it. For the cop, this still wasn't obvious. He was blinded by pride and the false sense of power his uniform gave him. He stepped closer, the distance closing, thinking his authority was growing stronger with every stride. Every casual passerby who noticed this dynamic gave a slight glance, then continued their way, not wanting to get involved in what they assumed was just a routine altercation. Manny's friends noticed the cop approaching. They exchanged subtle glances, but no words were spoken. They trusted Manny completely. They knew him to be calm, composed, unshakable, years of experience. Countless battles, both inside the ring and out, had taught him one thing: rush leads to mistakes, calm leads to control. The sounds of the street seemed to fade in intensity as the distance closed between Manny and the cop. The honking cars, the laughter of children, the shouts of vendors, all became a backdrop to a single, silent tension. The air seemed to thicken, a subtle shift imperceptible to most, but anyone paying attention could feel it. Something significant was about to happen. No one in the crowd realized it yet, but a simple, ordinary evening walk was about to turn into a moment that would be shared online, replayed countless times, not for violence, but for the lesson it would teach about respect, power, and control. Even in that calm, ordinary moment, Manny's presence created an invisible boundary. The world continued around him, but within that invisible circle, the rules had already changed. This was no longer a normal street. It was the stage for a test of courage, judgment, and ego, and one man's calm was about to rewrite the outcome. The air had grown heavier as the cop closed the distance, his swagger growing with each step. To him, Manny Pacquiao was just another man on the street, a man to intimidate, to test, to provoke. The crowd around them still didn't know the history behind those calm, measured steps. They couldn't see the years of battles, discipline, and legendary skill that Manny carried silently. All they saw was an ordinary man standing in front of an overconfident officer. The cop finally stopped just a few feet away. He leaned slightly forward, chest out, his voice rising, sharp and commanding. "Hey, what are you doing here? Think you're special?" A laugh escaped his lips, small but condescending. He scanned Manny's friends, letting his eyes linger, testing for reactions. He was used to getting responses: fear, compliance, groveling. But this time, nothing. Not a flinch. Not a twitch, just calm, quiet, unshakable focus. For a split second, doubt flickered across the cop's face. But pride is a dangerous thing. He smirked, raised his voice louder, and let the venom slip through words that were not only meant to intimidate, but to belittle and insult. "Who do you think you are, huh? Don't just walk around like you own this street." He added a subtle, racist jab, an insult designed to humiliate, to provoke, to make a public spectacle. The words landed in the air, sharp and cutting, echoing against the walls of the street. The crowd shifted, some froze mid-step, unsure whether to walk past or intervene. A few held their phones up, instinctively capturing the confrontation. Others exchanged uneasy glances, a silent acknowledgement that this was no ordinary street encounter. Manny's friends felt the tension spike, but they said nothing. Manny didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a sudden movement. His eyes simply met the cop's calm, precise, and measured. That gaze alone created discomfort. People around could feel it, the quiet strength of a man who had faced real threats his entire life. The cop, however, mistook silence for fear. He leaned closer, invading the small bubble of personal space around Manny. Pride whispered in his ears, telling him this man would break. Arrogance told him that a badge and a loud voice could control the situation. "Don't just stare at me like that." The cop barked, his face turning red with frustration. "Answer me. You think your fame makes you untouchable?" The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The crowd around them held their breath, sensing the tension could snap at any moment. Some glanced toward Manny, trying to read his reaction, expecting the calm man to suddenly explode. But Manny didn't. His posture didn't change. His hands remained relaxed. He allowed the words to reach him without allowing them to disturb his inner balance. He understood a simple truth. Real strength doesn't react to insults. It absorbs and redirects them. The cop, now growing bolder, tried to provoke a reaction from Manny's friends instead. He turned his attention toward them, waving a finger, attempting to intimidate. But Manny subtly shifted, standing slightly in front of his friends. Not as a shield, but as a silent declaration. "This ends here, without chaos. But it ends on my terms." By now, the street was quiet. Vendors paused mid-task. Pedestrians slowed. Even the sound of distant traffic seemed muted, as if the world itself had recognized the rising tension. The cop's arrogance clashed with Manny's calm, creating an invisible storm that drew the attention of everyone nearby. And then, the cop crossed a line that no one expected. He raised his voice even higher, adding another insult, more pointed, meant to humiliate Manny in front of everyone watching. "Don't act like you're better than me. You're nothing but a man walking down the street." A few people gasped. Others instinctively took a step back. Children clung to their parents. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone felt it. The moment when pride meets control, and the outcome is uncertain. Manny's expression remained calm. He let the words settle, letting the tension build without releasing it. That calm, that deliberate lack of reaction, made the cop increasingly agitated. He misread Manny's silence as weakness, his arrogance blinding him to the danger of underestimating the man in front of him. The moment had arrived. The line had been crossed. The cop thought he had the upper hand, but what he didn't know, what no one could see yet, was that the calmest person on the street wasn't powerless. It was exactly the opposite. He was waiting, watching, measuring, and, when he finally acted, it wouldn't be out of anger. It wouldn't be out of rage. It would be precise, controlled, and unforgettable. Have you ever seen someone push the wrong person and instantly realize their mistake too late? The street seemed frozen in time. Every honk, every laugh, every distant shout had faded into the background. Manny's eyes never left the cop, whose chest heaved with a mixture of anger and confusion. The arrogance in the officer's posture was palpable, but to Manny, it was just noise. Noise that could easily be redirected, neutralized, or allowed to collapse on its own. Manny felt the energy of the moment, the subtle vibrations of tension in the air. He understood something few people ever realize. The real danger wasn't the cop's words, or even the aggression. It was the crowd's expectation. People assumed someone would react. People expected a fight. People expected chaos. But Manny had learned long ago that power isn't measured by how fast you act. It's measured by when and how. The right reaction at the right time can stop a situation completely. The wrong reaction, even if aggressive, can escalate into disaster. He placed a hand subtly on the shoulder of his closest friend, a small gesture, almost imperceptible. "Stay calm." His body language said, "Do not escalate." His friends understood. They knew this man had faced opponents far stronger, faster, and angrier than any civilian could ever be. They trusted him completely. In his mind, Manny weighed his options. He could respond quickly, with words or physical force, and the cop would likely back down. But that would serve no purpose. It would satisfy ego, prove nothing, and potentially escalate a situation that didn't need escalation. The lesson he wanted to teach had to be about respect, not fear. He could see it clearly. This was a moment of choice. One step wrong, one word misplaced, and the tension would snap. The cop, blinded by pride, would likely overreach, and the crowd, sensing danger, would react unpredictably. Manny knew all of this, and yet he remained calm, deliberate, and in control. He thought about the years in the ring, the endless hours of training, the fights where a single misstep could mean losing everything. He thought about his career, not just the victories, but the discipline, the mental fortitude, the control over his emotions. That same discipline applied here. This wasn't a fight for a title belt. This was a fight for respect and for order. Manny's gaze shifted slightly to the cop. He could see the subtle signs of frustration building: tightened jaw, flaring nostrils, hands twitching. The officer had crossed the line, and Manny knew the world would be watching. Not just the people on the street, but everyone who might later see this moment captured on phone cameras. It wasn't just a test of patience. It was a lesson in restraint. He took a deep breath, feeling the calm energy flow through him. A quiet power that had nothing to do with aggression. Manny realized that action didn't always mean striking. Sometimes, action meant standing firm, setting boundaries, and letting your presence communicate what words never could. He shifted slightly forward, just enough to subtly create a boundary between the cop and his friends. Not threatening, not aggressive, just deliberate, like drawing a line in the sand. Manny's body spoke for him. This ends here. Not because I'm angry, but because I choose it. He could end the confrontation in a second if he chose. Everyone knew it. The cop's arrogance made him believe he was in control. But Manny's calm energy radiated authority far stronger than any uniform could provide. This was the moment where ego would meet real power, and real power wasn't loud. It was precise, measured, and invisible until it strikes. Manny's mind calculated, analyzed, anticipated. He imagined the worst case scenarios. He visualized each step, each potential movement the cop might make, and he smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but because he knew he could stop any escalation without chaos. He had faced far worse opponents inside the ring, and this man was unarmed, overconfident, and completely unaware of the danger he had just courted. Finally, Manny made his choice. Calmly, deliberately, he stepped forward slightly and spoke, his voice steady, quiet, and measured. "You don't need to threaten me. You don't need to prove anything. Step back, and this ends." The words were soft, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that comes from confidence rooted in skill and discipline. The crowd felt it. The cop, blinded by arrogance, didn't immediately understand, but his subconscious registered the authority in Manny's tone, the stillness in his posture, the invisible pressure in his calm. Manny wasn't preparing to fight. He was preparing to command respect. And that choice, that decision, would determine everything that followed. The street remained silent. Everyone held their breath. Even the distant sounds, the hum of traffic, the vendors' calls, the children's laughter, seemed muted. Like the world itself was waiting, because in that pause, the power of the calmest man in the room was on full display, and no one, not even the cop, had fully realized it yet. If you were in Manny's shoes, would you react with anger or with control? Could you stand calm while others expected chaos? The cop's smirk faltered, just slightly, but pride quickly reclaimed its hold. He raised his voice, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Did I scare you?" he barked, chest rising with each word. "You think your fame makes you untouchable?" The pedestrians nearby paused mid-step. Street vendors froze mid-motion, their hands gripping their baskets of food. Even a delivery driver slowed, noticing the tension radiating like a storm ready to strike. Manny's calm, quiet presence created an invisible force field, but the cop didn't sense it. Yet, he stepped closer, invading Manny's personal space deliberately. Pride clouded his judgment. He believed that proximity would force a reaction, that silence, Manny's unwavering gaze, was weakness. It wasn't Manny's friends exchanged worried glances, but they trusted him completely. They had seen this energy before, the subtle balance between awareness and action. Manny didn't need to shout or strike. His calm alone unsettled the aggressive officer. The cop jabbed a finger toward Manny, leaning slightly forward, trying to intimidate the legendary boxer with posture alone. His tone dripped with condescension, arrogance, and impatience. "You think you can just stand there and stare at me? "Step aside, old man, or do you want to test me?" The words hit the air sharp and threatening. A few bystanders instinctively raised their phones, capturing the moment. Some whispered to friends, unsure if this was going to escalate. The street had become a theater, and Manny's calm was the stage. Manny's posture didn't change. He didn't flinch. His hands remained relaxed at his sides, his feet planted firmly, energy radiating authority without aggression. He subtly shifted to slightly shield his friends, not as a show of force, but as a calculated positioning. Every movement was deliberate, measured, an unspoken lesson in control. "Step back," Manny said quietly but clearly. "Apologize. This ends now." The words were calm, but their weight carried far more authority than the cops' loud threats. For a brief moment, the arrogance flickered in the officer's eyes. Pride battled instinct. Ego clashed with reality. Instead of listening, the cop let frustration guide him. He leaned in, hand rising in a threatening gesture, trying to assert dominance physically. This was the point of no return. The tension exploded, not in chaos yet, but in anticipation. The calm before the storm. The crowd collectively held its breath. Pedestrians stopped walking. Vendors froze mid-task. A man crossing the street turned to watch, bag in hand, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. Manny moved. Just a little, barely perceptible. Not an attack, not an outburst, just a subtle shift. A measured redirection of the cop's motion. The officer, taken aback, stumbled slightly, losing his rhythm. He had underestimated the man standing before him. It wasn't a punch, it wasn't even physical aggression. It was precision, control, and presence. Manny demonstrated that real power doesn't need chaos. It needs calm, awareness, and timing. The cop's friends, who had been leaning in behind him, began to pull him back, realizing that their companion had crossed a line he couldn't handle. Pride crumbled. Confusion replaced arrogance. The crowd's collective tension began to release. Slowly, as they realized, the man everyone thought would react violently had chosen restraint over rage. For a moment, silence reigned. Manny didn't advance. He didn't threaten further. He simply stood firm, steady, and focused. The cop, for the first time, realized his miscalculation. He had assumed intimidation and aggression would be enough, but it wasn't. Authority, control, and calmness had neutralized the situation entirely. Manny's gaze softened as he glanced at his friends. "Are you all okay?" he asked quietly. The words were gentle, protective, but unmistakably firm. They nodded. He had handled the threat without letting chaos take hold. The street gradually returned to its ordinary rhythm, though the invisible tension lingered. Vendors returned to their calls, pedestrians continued walking, and the children resumed their laughter. But for anyone who had witnessed the exchange, the lesson was clear. Real power doesn't need violence. Real strength is measured by control, not aggression. The moment became a silent testament to discipline and respect. The cop had been shown, without a single raised fist, that underestimating the wrong person carries consequences, even without harm being done. The bystanders had all learned it too. If you were standing there, would you have remained calm like Manny, or reacted in anger? Could you control yourself under extreme provocation? The street had become eerily quiet. Even the distant hum of traffic seemed to fade, replaced by the invisible weight of anticipation. The cop, still flushed with frustration, tried to regain control. But the earlier stumble, the subtle, precise movement Manny had used, had already shaken him. Pride is fragile, and it cracks easily when tested by someone calm and confident. The officer straightened, squaring his shoulders, but the slight wobble lingered. His mind raced, trying to calculate the next move. He had threatened, shouted, and tried to intimidate. None of it had worked. The people watching sensed it. The legendary boxer before him wasn't reacting with rage, yet he was clearly in complete control. Manny took a deliberate step forward, just enough to assert presence without aggression. Every movement was measured, each subtle shift of weight, intentional. His eyes locked on the cops, not with hatred or anger, but with calm authority. The message was clear. You are in my space. You have crossed the line, but this doesn't have to escalate. You still have time, Manny said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made even the boldest passerby pause. Step back. And this ends here. No one needs to get hurt. The cop hesitated. Confusion flashed across his face. He had expected an outburst, a violent reaction. Instead, he found himself facing an immovable calm, a presence that radiated more authority than any badge or uniform could grant. For a moment, he questioned himself. But ego is a stubborn companion, and he shook off the doubt. Then, he raised his hand again, an instinctive gesture of threat, thinking he could finally force Manny to react. That was his mistake. In one smooth, deliberate motion, Manny moved. Not a strike, not a punch, not a display of anger, just a subtle redirection, his hands guiding the cop's raised arm to the side, just enough to break his balance, just enough to neutralize the threat. The officer stumbled, a small but unmistakable loss of composure that stunned everyone watching. The crowd gasped, pedestrians instinctively stepped back, vendors paused mid-sale, even distant drivers slowed to watch. What they were witnessing wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration of absolute control, of power without chaos. Manny didn't advance further. He didn't need to. His calmness, his precision, and his silent command had done the work. The cop's friends rushed forward, pulling him back, murmuring apologies and excuses. Pride, once inflated, had deflated in the span of seconds. Humility replaced arrogance, and confusion replaced confidence. The silence lingered. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful. Every person on the street, every witness, could feel the weight of what had just happened. No one had been hurt. No one had raised a fist. And yet, the lesson was unmistakable. Underestimate the wrong person at your own peril. Manny took a step back, creating space between himself and the cop. His eyes softened as he glanced at his friends, checking that they were safe. "Are you all okay?" he asked quietly. His tone carried care, authority, and reassurance all at once. They nodded, grateful, still awestruck by the calm power Manny had displayed. The cop, now fully aware of his miscalculation, muttered something under his breath, a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. He realized that the man he had tried to provoke wasn't just a celebrity or a boxer. He was a master of discipline, awareness, and control, a living legend who could stop chaos without ever raising a hand in anger. Manny's gaze returned to the street, scanning briefly to ensure the scene was under control. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. And he didn't need to assert himself physically. His authority had spoken louder than any act of violence ever could. The crowd slowly began to disperse, conversations resuming, life returning to normal. Yet, those who had watched this exchange would not forget it. They had witnessed something rare, true strength expressed through control, not aggression. The street, now ordinary again, carried the echo of the moment. Every passerby who had paused or held their breath would remember the lesson. That calm, measured authority is far more powerful than anger, loudness, or aggression. That real power lies not in striking, but in controlling the outcome with precision and restraint. And Manny, he walked away, calm, collected, a quiet protector who had demonstrated that strength isn't about being the loudest or the most aggressive. It's about being deliberate, disciplined, and unshakable. Could you have stayed calm in that situation, knowing the world was watching? Would you have controlled your actions, or would ego have taken over? The street slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Vendors resumed their calls. Children's laughter filled the alleyways again, and the hum of traffic returned to its normal pace. To anyone passing by who hadn't witnessed the confrontation, it would seem like just another ordinary evening. But for those who had seen what unfolded, the memory was already etched in their minds. They had witnessed a rare display of discipline, calm, and authority. The kind of power that doesn't need aggression to be respected. The cop, still flushed with embarrassment, had been pulled back by his colleagues and friends. Pride had crumbled. Arrogance dissolved into confusion. He walked away slowly, realizing that he had underestimated the man in front of him. The lesson was humbling and clear. Intimidation and aggression don't always yield results, especially when faced with someone who wields control like a weapon. Manny Pacquiao didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice, didn't boast, didn't make a scene. He simply checked on his friends, ensuring they were safe. Their expressions a mix of relief and awe. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Their nods were enough. There was no need for further words. For Manny, The moment wasn't about proving himself to the cop, the crowd, or even the cameras that had captured the encounter. It was about protection, respect, and control. The world could watch and marvel later, but in that moment his focus was simple: ensure no one was harmed, and assert authority without aggression. That was the true test of strength. The crowd, now slowly dispersing, carried with them the memory of the calm energy that had dominated the scene. Phones clicked, capturing short clips, videos destined to be shared online. But this wasn't a viral fight or a dramatic beat-up. It was a lesson, subtle but powerful, that strength isn't measured by who yells the loudest, who strikes the hardest, or who appears intimidating. Strength is measured by control, by presence, by the ability to command respect without resorting to chaos. By the next day, videos of the encounter had spread across social media platforms. People shared it not for shock or violence, but for the message it delivered. Real authority doesn't require aggression. Even strangers who had never seen Manny Pacquiao in the ring could feel the lesson from just a few seconds of footage, the quiet, unshakable power of a man who had mastered control over himself and his environment. Comment sections lit up with admiration. Viewers marveled at the restraint, the discipline, and the calm precision. The story became a conversation starter. People asked, how would you react in a situation like this? Could you remain calm under pressure? The lesson transcended the immediate encounter. It became a moment to reflect on ego authority and the true meaning of strength. Manny, meanwhile, didn't seek recognition. He walked away quietly, leaving the cop and the crowd with the lesson intact. Strength, he demonstrated, isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about staying unshakable in the face of provocation, making deliberate choices, and protecting others without losing control. For the cop, it was a lesson he would not soon forget. For the bystanders, it was a story that would be shared, replayed, and discussed. And for anyone watching the videos online, it became a symbol. The strongest people in the room aren't always those who intimidate. They are those who command respect without a single act of rage. As the sun set and the streetlights flickered on, the ordinary street had returned to ordinary life, but the memory of that extraordinary moment lingered. Everyone who had witnessed it carried a quiet respect for what had just happened. And in that silence, a universal truth became clear. Real power isn't measured by fists or aggression. It's measured by calm, discipline, and the courage to act with control when everyone else expects chaos. Real strength is discipline, not rage. Type legend in the comments. Could you have stayed calm like Manny in that moment, knowing the world was watching?